We're going to talk with our good friend Ray Holman from the United Auto Workers, and your local number is?
6,000.
6,000. And he has a couple bits of news for us. First of all, he's going to comment on the breaking news that has occurred where we're talking about the governor signing, not to anybody's surprise, or at least not to mine, the legislation that came to him that is now really going to make it very much more difficult for LGBT couples to be able to adopt in the state of Michigan because of religious objections on the part of. Give us a little history of how your department was once very involved with adoptions, and you were sort of taken out of that, and it was given over to groups like Catholic Social Services, which now are saying they have a religious objection.
That's right. So as of right now, 2015, state employees do not perform any adoptions. We used to do quite a bit of that. 3 or 4 budget cycles, they outsource all of that work. And of course, the Department of Health and Human Services and state employees don't discriminate against anybody.
Right.
And it is, I would say, depressing to see this legislation signed by our governor on June 11th that would allow these nonprofit faith-based agencies to discriminate against people. And the thing about it, Bonnie and Bill, is, you know, they're doing this with tax dollars.
Yes.
So these
public dollars are going to support a religious end, which is not separation of church and state to my mind.
Right. So again, you know, state employees used to do a lot of that work, and we did a good job. And it was outsourced, and of course the money that was used to pay the state employees to perform that type of work is going all to outsourced nonprofit and private agencies. And so that was disheartening to see that. And what we have going on right now is parts of the state, foster care has been outsourced. So in Kent County, for example, all of foster care has already been outsourced. We know that there are groups that would like to continue that trend to outsource more of the child welfare duties. So adoption is certainly part of that, but you're also talking about children that are placed in foster homes and juvenile justice facilities.
When you say outsource, we're really talking about privatizing, and we're really talking about crony capitalism. We're talking about the workers don't fare as well as they do when they're a state worker. They're paid less, so the profit can be taken out for private or a group to be able to provide the same service.
That's right. So we're talking about private child placing agencies, and if you were to look at the amount of money that the caseworkers from those particular agencies make compared to a state employee, they make considerably less with less benefits. And I'm proud to say that when state government is appropriately funded, that our caseworkers do a fantastic job, and there's no reason to outsource this work. Unfortunately, I wish that was the only thing that was going on, but during this last budget cycle, I'm talking about the upcoming budget that starts in October, we see that Maxey Training School has been closed. This is also depressing, and I'll tell you why. This facility provides mental health treatment in a secure setting for teens that are almost adults in that 16, 17, 18-year-old range. And it was a place of last resort.
Yes.
And unfortunately, what's going to happen is these kids aren't going to have good placements to go to, and eventually some of them may end up in prison where they're not going to get the mental health treatment that they could have received at Maxey Training School.
And they will be made worse by being juveniles in an adult system.
What was the rationale behind doing that?
Well, they have for the last 4 budget cycles been trying to close Maxey Training School, and as the UAW Local 6,000 legislative liaison, I would say because private companies want to take over that work. The lawmakers that passed this bill would say because they can do it cheaper. And unfortunately, we've seen this movie before where a private agency says they're going to provide some type of government service cheaper, and for the first 2 weeks they do, and then all of a sudden, after they're sued or they have problems or they have change orders and they come back for more money, they're not cheaper.
They're rarely cheaper and never as good or better.
Isn't the state subcontract or a prison in northern Michigan that's a maximum prison, the real bad guys.
Yeah, I mean, there's no shortage of things to talk about. So also, we see that there's going to be a private prison open in Lake County in Baldwin. And what had happened in the legislature, they gave permission to bring prisoners from Vermont to Michigan, and they can have any type of security level that they want, so they could be maximum security. They passed legislation to allow that. The fear is that once you open this private prison, that you are opening the door for more prisons to be privatized. And, you know, I've heard the argument that there's not going to be enough, for example, prisoners from Vermont for the company to make money, so there'll be more pressure to bring in state of Michigan prisoners. One of the big arguments with this capital was, okay, you want to open a private prison, can you put in the bill that this could only be for outstate prisoners? And of course, the majority would not go for that, so they did leave open the door that Michigan prisoners could in fact go there potentially. So it's just another example of move towards outsourcing state jobs. And one thing that we know, Bill, is when you're talking about outsourcing criminal justice duties and child welfare responsibilities, we know from around the country and here in Michigan, there's often bad outcomes.
Yes. I mean, we've seen this, you're right, it's a movie we've seen before. I'd like to return and sort of go back through the three issues again, because I think they deserve additional scrutiny. I mean, we have 13,000 kids in care in the state of Michigan that could be placed in adoptive homes. And that's a lot of youngsters that we are either warehousing someplace or we have them in foster care. And the system now really is going to face a terrible rupture here with trying to get some of these kids placed. Here's one of the particular ironies, I think. We are about to hear the Pope come and give his big encyclical on climate change, but he's been pretty vocal about the fact that when it comes to priorities, we shouldn't put concerns about.
And there are lawmakers that want to outsource the rest of the child welfare system. And by the way, I'm not just talking about foster care. I'm also talking about parts potentially of Children's Protective Services. So those are the caseworkers that investigate, let's say, a call from the police regarding a child abuse complaint. Well, not every case results in a child being removed from a home or court intervention. Sometimes there are problems, and we provide services on the front end to prevent further problems. Some of that preventative work, there's forces that want to privatize more of that work. Additionally, what happened during this last budget cycle coming up for the next year, again, it starts in October, they closed a number of buildings, now Department of Health and Human Services buildings. One of the buildings they closed was a centralized intake building for Children's Protective Services. And those are the folks that work 3 shifts, 24/7, and they handle all the calls from around the state for child abuse. Well, their building's being closed down, and what they want to move towards is having people take child abuse complaints in their own homes through their computers and with the technology, which maybe sounds good to a person because you could get up in your pajamas and go right to work and take complaints over the phone. But again, as the representative of the Local 6000, I think I'm concerned that they're also setting this function up to be outsourced.
It sounds like it.
And the problem with that is when you are taking child abuse complaints in over the phone, it's actually something that's really complicated, and you have to have a really good understanding of the child protection law. You have to have a really good understanding of department policies. You have to be able to make critical decisions on the phone, because not everything is technically a child abuse complaint. It could be a law enforcement issue. And so my point is, there's a lot of things you have to negotiate over the phone. It's like being a 911 operator. Essentially, you have to be really good at what you're doing. And it's nothing you'd want to farm out to somebody that wasn't highly trained. Most of the people that take the calls coming in have been caseworkers for years and years and years, so they know what to do. So again, I hate to see that responsibility outsourced with some politician thinking, oh, they're just answering the telephone call. It's much more than that.
Because that's how they'll describe it.
Correct.
I think the other thing that bothered people about this last weekend was another 24-hour cycle for getting a bill signed into law. I mean, it went like greased lightning again. Mm-hmm. And that's not what government was about.
Yeah, that's right. And I've seen that happen a lot, Bill, over the last 7 years since I've been down at the legislature. What will happen is the majority party will make a decision amongst themselves within a committee, and they know they have the votes to ram it through.
They're bulletproof.
They don't tell the minority party
Yeah.
or people who maybe are opposed to their ideas.
Or the media.
Or the media. So they come in and they just lickety split past things, and you don't have much of a chance to rally people or educate people and to put pressure on people. One of the things that we did do, and a positive thing that our members did, and also county commissioners, school superintendents, was originally Governor Snyder wanted to close over 40 Department of Health and Human Services buildings around the state. So, for example, they wanted to close a lot of locations in lower northern Michigan. But the problem is when you force a family to drive 2 counties in the winter over to come into the DHS office is dangerous. And, we talked about Lake County. A lot of people that live there do not have access to the internet. It's hard for people to believe, but a lot of people don't have access or the capabilities to apply for assistance over the internet. So we actually worked with, again, different people, partners in the community, engaged our members, engaged lawmakers, and we're able to reduce that, we believe, quite significantly. It went down to about 15 work sites. We still think that's too many. This idea that you can do everything online is good in theory, but in practice, it really just doesn't work.
Well,
I have
I
some
think
room.
anybody that does anything online knows that.
Yeah.
Whether it's from paying a
Yeah.
bill or getting a service.
Yeah.
I have some real concerns too. I mean, just with the shutting of the facilities and having people work from home. I work from home all the time, and I can tell you that there's always the random problem where somebody walks in, or you've got the meter reader comes and knocks on the door and has to ask you something. Particularly in these kinds of sensitive cases and with privacy issues and concerns, it just seems to me like this is really the wrong trend.
Yeah, this absolutely needs to be thought out really carefully. I mean, when you talk about the privacy, right, so if a caseworker's teenage son comes in, you can see the case coming in, and they deal with a lot of sexual abuse complaints, for
Allegations.
examples.
It may not
And
be true. I mean, so you have that problem too, that it's not that, you could have people's whole lives ruined by gossip that gets around the community.
absolutely, yeah, it's highly, highly sensitive information. There's no doubt about that. And also, again, I guess I think some of our caseworkers, when they initially hear this, they're like, oh, good, I could work from home. That sounds fantastic. But you really need to think this stuff through. And also, part of the justification from Governor Snyder to close these work sites, he wanted to save, by the way, $5.3 million. Now, they reduced that to $2.5 million, meaning that's what the department needs to achieve by closing and consolidating buildings. But part of the rationale was, well, we're going to put caseworkers in schools and hospitals, which in theory is great, and we support that idea about putting caseworkers in the community. But the reality has been, up till now, they've not been given the resources. There's not enough people placed there, and they're overwhelmed when they go into schools and into hospitals. And it's basically like sending somebody into a forest fire with a squirt gun. So when I hear this excuse or these rationales for these policy decisions, and I think about what's really happening, that's something that I feel like I really need to educate people about. Like, if we're going to do this, we need to do it the right way. Taking child abuse complaints from your home. We need to really think about that.
There's all sorts of reasons why these policies, as you're saying, Bill, should go slowly and not quickly, because ramming things through without knowing the full ramifications. You and I know that the law of unintended consequences operates very suddenly and swiftly and badly in many cases, but it's really hard to go back.
Absolutely. And you know what? I do want to get in one more thing, because I'm not done yet. They're also they're also outsourcing. I think I mentioned on a previous show, independent living services with their adult care workers. So that started. Now we're getting the stories are coming in where there's problems, where we're hearing from citizens and families. And so what's happening is independent living service is a service that caseworkers provide to families so that people can stay in their homes. And there's a passive enrollment feature with a program called Michigan Health Link. And if people don't respond to a letter, they're automatically taken away from their DHS caseworker and put in with a private HMO. Yeah. And again, this is something that we're hearing stories already. And just recently, Senator Ananich, who's the minority leader on the Democratic Party in the Senate, and the vice chair of the Health and Human Services Appropriations Committee, Vincent Gregory, wrote a letter to the director, Nick Lyons, saying that they really need to change, they would like them to change that passive enrollment piece. So again, what's happening is if you're defaulting into a private HMO, being taken away from your caseworker, and that's another example I wanted to mention that's happening
It's like
right
getting
now.
slammed into one of those other energy companies, you don't realize it's happening to you.
See, that's, on the face of it, you could look at it and go, oh, wow, maybe that's good, but anyone that's dealt with individuals in some of those circumstances understand mail is messy. It just doesn't work well. You lose it, you set it aside, there's a lot of mental health issues.
Oh, yeah. And one of the things that really bothers me is that we've seen in this case, again, this sort of demonize, the way that they, I think in some ways, get away with this, is that they've demonized state workers as living off the fat of the land and wasting your tax dollars, and you're just living this lush life. In reality, I think the pendulum is starting to shift, and people are realizing that what we want are people working at good jobs, at good wages, with good benefits.
Absolutely. What I say is the departments need to be appropriately funded, not overfunded, but appropriately funded. And I've heard that about state employees, but the reality is the vast majority of state employees do a good job if you give them a fighting chance. They want to do a good job. These caseworkers are very dedicated. I was with a group of Children's Protective Services workers on Wednesday, and the stuff that they have to deal with on a day-to-day basis and the commitment, it's really impressive. But if you don't give them the tools to do the job, of course, they're not going to be successful.
Well, thank you, Ray. You've given us a litany of things to think about. It's been a very busy week for the legislature, unfortunately, heading in the wrong direction. I'm really sorry to see Maxey close. I did work with the Restorative Justice Program for the Michigan Bureau of Juvenile Justice, and Maxey was the one place you never want to close, because when you didn't have any place to put a dangerous kid who was a danger to himself or others, that was the one place that took them, and I don't know what you do without it. It's very sad to hear that.
Well, thanks for letting me on the show, and I really appreciate it. Thanks.